Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming. Our speaker today is Dr. John Holsinger. In my opinion, John is the most prolific and most productive cave biologist that is still alive and working today. In a quiet moment, some scientists perhaps fantasize about having something named in their honor. Our speaker today actually has 6 different cave critters named in his honor. Each of them sport lengthy, scientific-sounding names. Such nomenclature is difficult to run through the spell checker of a layman's computer, and each has been named in honor of Dr. Holsinger. Along the way, John has caved with many legends and had a lot of fun adventures. He has been underground with the likes of founding NSS President Bill Stevenson, the legendary John E. Cooper, Roger Baruti, and others. For all of his scientific accomplishments and all of his exploratory caving, I think there is one single item that, for my money, is the coolest thing about John Holsinger. The thing that by far has enabled him to woo more chicks than any other accomplishment is John has the neatest caver nickname in the history of speleology. His nickname is Captain Karst. Please enjoy your afternoon with legendary cave biologist, pioneering explorer, Captain Karst, occasionally known by the name of Dr. John Holsinger.
Great pleasure. Oh, stand here? Yeah. Okay. He's got this down. It's like being in the Army or something. Well, how did it all get started? Well, probably when back in the middle 50s when I was a student at Virginia Tech, they had something there and still do, I think, called the Tech Cave Club or something like this, and I got kind of involved with this and went in a number of rather easy caves near Blacksburg in Montgomery County. Some of you been there, you know some of these, like Tawny's Cave and Vickers Road and caves like that. So it was a great introduction to caves, and I was a biology major, geology minor, so I really got turned on to some of the stuff I was seeing, and I really thought this was really neat. Well, somewhere along the line, I ended up going to a cave called New River, which was really a step up, a very interesting cave, and I understand now that it's going to become an NSS sanctuary or something like this. Yeah, that's a great idea. I actually got lost in that cave for a short period of time, and I left an old bag of lunch in there, and I told somebody that someday, that's the cave rats got it, it's probably still back there someplace. So after that, the last thing I did before I left Tech was to get involved with some of these other guys, and they said, we really want to take you to a really nice, big, mean cave. So over in Giles County is this thing called Pig Hole. And so we got back in there, and there's about a 80 or 90 foot drop. And said, now we want you to rappel. We're going to show you how to rappel. So they brought out this Bill Cuddington. Is Bill Cuddington here? This big, thick manila rope. You put it around your butt, and you go down like this. Probably an old-fashioned way to go. It's about an 80 or 90 foot drop. And it was kind of scary, but I did it, and I got to the bottom, messed around, and thought, now how do I get out of here? Well, we should have brought those little Prusik things along, but we forgot them. I said, oh my God, what am I going to do here? Well, there's a back staircase, so somehow or another I got up there, and they pulled me over this ledge. And I told this story a couple of times to people, and about once a year I have this horrible dream, and I'm in that cave, couldn't get out. So kind of the way I got started. So after I left Tech, I was in the Army for a while, and then went to Hawaii and got introduced to lava tubes. I didn't really do much with that. It was an interesting comparison to normal caves that I had been used to. And came back and sort of saw some of my old friends and was start doing some caving. And at the time, I was living up in Northern Virginia when I came back, and I ran into a Brad Cobb. I don't know if anybody remembers him or not. He was managing Massanutten Caverns, and he said, "Why don't you join the NSS?" And I said, "Well, I'd have heard about it. I don't know very much about it." He said, "I'll sign your card or something. You have to have somebody endorse your membership or something like that." So I turned it in and started teaching biology in the DC area and earth science. And as soon as I joined the NSS, I got this nice letter saying, you know, "Welcome to the NSS, and you should think about becoming a member of the DC Grotto," and so on and so forth. And at that time, it was a great time. I think there's a lot of really great people, like Bill Stevenson was there, and Henry Douglas, who was doing the Virginia Cave Survey. All kinds of things were going on at that point. It was a great time, I think, to get involved in caving. And Bill Davies was in the grotto. He just finished his book on West Virginia. And then we decided to, let's see, try to get this right. Okay, before I get to the slides, I want to talk a little bit about the next thing we did. So during this time, they were starting, the DC Grotto was starting an exchange meeting with the Baltimore Grotto. So went over there, and lo and behold, that the speaker that night was John Cooper. A lot of you know John Cooper, who had been to Cuba. He had these great shots of Cuban caves and stuff, and he was a biologist, and he was teaching biology in one of the Baltimore schools, and had the same interests that I did, and we became instant friends. We took our cave club, or our outdoor club, or whatever we had teaching, over to the Panhandle Caves over in West Virginia, and got to be really good buddies. And I said, "Well, John, I'm working on a master's degree at George Washington and James Madison, and I'm doing a master's degree on the invertebrate or cave fauna of Virginia." And he thought that was a great idea. And I said, we should get together. And so in May 1961, and you'll see a picture of that here in a minute, we met down in Rockbridge County at a little cave called Showalter's Cave, which unfortunately now I think has been filled in. And that was sort of the beginning of the Biological Survey of Virginia Caves, which has resulted in a number of publications. And later on, Roger Baruti came on board, and a number of people. And so pretty soon we're going to go to the slides because we're going to run out of things to talk about here. But that's pretty much the way this whole business got started. And then, excuse me, one other thing, we're talking about doing some extended caving, and I want to mention at this point that Bill Stevenson was founding father of the NSS, was in the DC Grotto, and it couldn't have been a more opportune time to get involved with something. Bill Davies, who had just finished his caverns in West Virginia, was a member of the DC Grotto, and a number of out-of-town people would visit, like Russ Gurney and Brother Nicholas, and all these people, all these great people, you know, this kind of stuff rubs off on you. So, I'm going to slides here in a minute. So, Bill, gonna get there in a minute. It's hard to be yakking here. Bill Stevenson, who I got to be friends with, and he said, we should do some real caving over this coming Thanksgiving weekend, and this is going to be 1961. And he said, I understand you've been to Southwest Virginia, and I understand it's a great place for caves, and I was just at a baseball game or something over here the other day, and I sat beside this guy who was from somewhere down in Southwest Virginia, someplace down in Russell County, a place called Castlewood or something. He was telling me there's some really big caves down there, and maybe we should all get together. So by this time I knew John Cooper, and so I said, let's meet down there someplace. and we'll start looking for caves and stuff like that. So we got a room, and one of those old hotels in one of these, I won't call them pioneer towns, but they're back here in the mountains near Castlewood, there on the Russell County line. And it's one of those old hotels that you go in, downstairs there's a big pot-bellied stove or something, and they heat the room up, and then there's a ventilator or open thing at the top, and the hot air goes up, and you're up in the bedroom. That's the way they heated those things. And so we all met there in that evening back there in November, whatever it was, in 1961, and got rooms up on the second floor. So, and George Titcomb had also gotten involved with this. So, and I think there's Jack Boss, I guess it was unfortunately deceased now. And so we all kind of met there that night and went up to this hotel room, and these guys were sort of, John Cooper and George Titcomb were getting really thirsty. They'd like to have a late evening drink. Well, you couldn't get anything alcoholic around there for hundreds of miles, not there, especially in the evening. You might get 3.2% beer, which you wouldn't really want, but even those, I think it was too late for that. And they were really thirsty, and they said, we saw Bill Stevenson. He came in, he had the room next to us, and we've heard that he always brings booze along on these trips, and we think we saw him carrying a couple of bottles of whiskey, and you know him a lot better than we do. Would you go over there and see if you could get us a drink? Because all we can buy around here is 3.2% beer, and they've already closed that out for the evening. So I thought, oh my God, I don't know. I know Bill Stevenson, but not quite that well. Well, I'll try it. So I went over, and I thought, well, the best way to approach this is to be, to knock on the door, and when I come in, I'll see those bottles, because we knew he always carried those bottles on caving trips, and look at those, and he'll get the idea that we're thirsty. Knock on the door. What do you want? It's late at night. Look at. I said, Bill, I want to go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning. Shut the door. I went back and broke the sad news. We survived it. Now, it's pretty soon. Now I'm gonna quit yakking here and whatever you running my mouth, and start showing you some pictures, because this is where the slideshow really starts. All right, so we're there in a town over there on the Russell County line called Banner's Corner. So this is going to be the first DOM. And this is November 1961.
No.
What? What?
First DOM was in '66.
No, the first DOM was in 1961.
Gilbert Hotel.
No. That's later. That comes later. This came first. This is.
All right, talk to you about it later.
Well, I was there. I should know, right? All right. Now, I'll go back a little bit until we'll catch up to that. This is when I first met John Cooper, and this is Showalter's Cave. That was the beginning. That was May 1961, and unfortunately that cave has been closed in, according to what I've heard recently. Okay. And here's John Cooper, and there was you told a story about the night later on when we had the little ordeal in Crookshank Hole. That was the night that we got Lew Bicking out of there, and I was still left below, and I was freezing to death. And good old John here had been in the Marine Corps, and he had one of these big, heavy Marine jackets. And to keep me from really freezing to death, they passed that jacket down to me until they could pull me out of that mess. And I remember putting that jacket around, and I'd read someplace if you put a carbide lamp or something in behind, you can heat yourself up a little bit. And my teeth quit chattering, but I burned a hole in the lighting. This this was a sacred thing for John. This was his Marine jacket. And until this day, he's never let me forget that. He has it in his house someplace down in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's back in a closet. And every once in a while, I think I've heard he walks by there and throws daggers at it. Whatever. All right, so now we are at the first DOM, and this is Castlewood, and that's the Castlewood School there. This is actually Banner's Corner. I'm sorry, it's called Banner's Corner. And if you look closely, you will see a big opening into a cave, and that goes into Banner's Corner Cave. Now, apparently when they put the school here, they cut some costs and so forth, and they just ran their septic tank. They didn't use a septic tank, they just put their flush toilets down into the cracks and crevices. And you can imagine what it's like in that cave. Get back in there and see all these white things hanging down. Oh my God, are these cave planarians? I said, no, I think that's toilet paper. Well, it turned out to be a fairly nice cave, and Stuart Peck and I came back there a few years later and did collected water. We had a clothespin on our nose and carried it out and analyzed it. And I won't tell you what was all within this water. But that was the beginning of the DOM. We had a good weekend. All right, so I'm going to go through the rest of this with pictures and quit talking so much. Now, this was actually at the first DOM also, and unfortunately, George Titcomb on the left, who's now since been deceased, and John Cooper, and oh, what's he got on there, that jacket? He's got the hole in it hidden. And over there is Jack Boss on the other side, and unfortunately, I think he's deceased too. But this was 1961. Now, we'll just jump around a little bit. Somewhere along the line, you might recognize this gentleman. This was at the 1963 NSS convention in Mountain Lake, and that's Tom Barr. This is the president of the NSS. Most of you have heard of him. A lot of the older people knew Tom, unfortunately also deceased. And at about this period of time, I met Tom and actually met him back in D.C. and got interested. I got interested in him because I was interested in cave biology and finding out more about it. And so he was starting up an Institute of Speleology or something at the University of Kentucky and asked me if I would like to be a grad student there. And I was actually finishing up a master's degree, and I started a master's thesis on cave biology in Virginia. And I thought, he said, "Do you want to come on out and work on a PhD?" And I said, "Sure." And so after the Mountain Lake Convention in '63, then I left for University of Kentucky and spent 3 years there. Anyway, here's a picture, an older picture of Tom, back when he was doing the caves of Tennessee, which most of you are familiar with. And he's got that pipe, whatever that stovepipe thing in his mouth that he carried around. Now, okay, now let's kind of jump ahead and I'll talk about some of the things we did in the next few years. This is a couple of grades, 1965, I believe, 61, 62. Yeah. This was the night we discovered the Explorers Club bottle in Endless Caverns, which you know is a commercial cave in the Shenandoah Valley. And for years and years we heard this about the Explorers Club had gone in there back in the 20s and had gone as far as they could go, but they apparently left a bottle marker in there in the depths of the cave at the furthest point of penetration. And so we always wanted to know whether this is really true, and we also wanted to survey Endless Caverns. And so we finally talked the management into letting us do that, but we have to do it late at night, and this is midnight in a couple of years later, 65, yeah. And that is Lew Bicking and another caver and myself. And it's midnight, 1965, and we stopped to take a break and looked up, and we saw, Lew and I at the same moment saw this bottle sitting up on the ledge. and that was the old bottle that the Explorers Club had left up there at the furthest point of penetration. Now since then, the cave has been extended beyond that, and another cave, a few years later, we connected another cave, which I had described, coming in from another direction. But that's pretty much the discovery. And of course, Lew, unfortunately, as you know, had a horrible, tragic accident some years later and is not with us any longer. Okay, now let's go back to DOMs. That this became a tradition. After 61, there was a year they were didn't happen for some reason, and then starting in the next year, 63, I guess, 62, yeah, we started to meet over in Pennington Gap, over in Lee County. Now, that this was one of those very early meetings there, and you'll recognize some of the people. I think some of the people in this picture may be out here. I think the guy that's going down in that manhole cover looking for a cave is Bill Biggers. Is he here?
1965, John.
What did I say?
Huh?
65, right?
I wasn't caving in 63.
No, I said this was 65.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, well you should know you're in the hole there, buddy. Well, if you look real carefully, you'll see 3 or 4 other people. There are a number of other people that are present in this audience. Somebody raise their hand back there. I'll see you back there. It's in this picture. There's several of them. There's a couple of, quite a few cavers. There's George Tickham, unfortunately, deceased. We're on the right. This guy over here. Does everybody know him?
Lew.
No, I don't want to mess this up. Can I point with this? Which way?
The center little button.
Center button.
In the middle.
Yep.
I don't want to turn it off.
There you go, there's your light.
Is he here today? I know he's here. You don't recognize him? There's Roger Baruti. Okay. Ed Bauer. There I am, way over on the right. Huh? Is this guy here? Yeah. Would you raise your hand, please?
Why?
Why? So we can't see your face. You haven't changed much, Bill. Okay.
Picture.
Did I miss anybody? This guy wasn't a caver. He was a local guy. He said he thought, Bill can tell the story. He went down in there. He thought that it might connect to a cave, and I don't think that happened. Did it?
It was only about 200 feet.
What?
It was only about 200 feet.
What was down there?
Just passing.
Okay, that's your story.
It wasn't plumbing.
All right, I think we better move on. Now, this button goes on right to the lower right. I don't want to mess this up.
Who's the guy on the right, John?
Yeah,
Or your left? The picture. Did you get
my right. On the button, it's right.
That's Bill Lucas.
Good. All right, I did it. I didn't make a mistake. Now, we're in Lee County, and Lee County was just, I had gone there earlier, a year or two early with Henry Douglas, and I just couldn't believe the unexplored cave, the big caves. It was just a magnificent place, hardly touched by cavers. And so that's why we had gone there with Bill Stevenson for that whole area, Southwest Virginia. This is I don't know whether that old store is still there, but it belonged to some guy named Rufus Unthank, and we looking for caves there. And of course, this was all kinds of cars. They were selling gasoline. This is way, way back, and he said, yeah, just down the road there's a hole in the off to the right, goes into this cave, and it's a great big cave, fellers. Somebody went in there, and they went all the way back. They got back in there, back under that mountain back there, and they saw light coming in. Well, this turns out it was the big cave. It's one of our great big caves. It's 7, 8, 9 miles Apache. It's called Unthank's Cave. We named it Unthank after Rufus Unthank. But that place is all fallen apart, I guess, by now. But it's historical because of the position there and the fact that these guys told us about the cave. All right, now let's look at some of these late November DOMs, and you'll see some pictures. Here's Roger Baruti and myself glaring at each other like we usually did. Probably had an argument or something, I don't know for sure. But most of you know Roger. Who's this over here on the right? Are you here?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Would you stand up? Have you changed? What are you doing here? Looking for cave spiders?
I'm a big one.
He's got a good sense of humor. One of my famous graduate students. You know, all of them have. I think Jill Yeager's here. All of them have done well over the years. Anybody know him?
Whittemore.
Whittemore, right. Okay. Wait a minute, there's somebody else in that picture. You can hardly see him. Anybody know him? Okay. I'll let you identify yourself. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you know this gentleman on the left?
I think he's the caver who went to Canada.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I haven't seen him for a long time. Now this wasn't Southwest Virginia. This is up in the valley someplace. Back in. Anybody know this guy? James Beck, in Kingsport, Tennessee, better known as Easter Pig. You see what kind of friends I had? See what kind of caving friends I had? Very interesting people. Now let's talk a little bit about do something else for a while. A few years later, come my head. I had this gentleman in the middle is Jan Stock, and he was he's deceased now, but he was in charge of the Amsterdam group groundwater. Primarily groundwater research and a lot of caving. And I ran into him at a meeting someplace, and he said, we are planning a trip to Haiti in the next few months. Would you like to join us? Haiti, man, that would sound really interesting, but also kind of weird. And so I met these guys, and you can see I'm to the right of Jan, right? He's up in the middle. And then the guy over on the right was Yields something or other. He was a French guy who came over there as to teach the Haitians or something, I don't know, it was exchange, some sort of thing. And then next guy on the left of Stock is Bodoșanianu, well, the late Bodoșanianu is a Romanian groundwater biologist and caver who left Romania when it was communistic and came over to work with Stock over in Amsterdam, and he came. And then that's Joost Notenbaum, who was a graduate student, who still around. I don't know if he's still doing research. And that's the group in Haiti. And as I say, I'm going to get into a lot of stories about Haiti, but it was a very unusual experience. Very primitive. We saw some really great caves. So let's go on, let's move on to another trip. Okay, now a year or two later, we hosted the International Groundwater Conference, and it was headquartered or had it in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. And these are European biospeleologists. Unfortunately, Guy Monnier on the left has recently died. Then in the middle is one of my grad students. Moving on, let's see. Way over was Steve Hedrick, graduate student. And then, who was with? Okay, Boris Sket is next over there from the right. And he was a Slovenian biologist who I had met earlier on a trip. And I remember commenting, he was showing me this fantastic karst, the Slovenian karst. This is world classic stuff, of course, a type locality for karst landscapes. And I said, well, Boris, this is pretty impressive, but we got some pretty impressive stuff in North America, in Virginia, in West Virginia too. And so he said, you can't come anywhere close to this stuff we've got over here. So a couple of years later, he was over here, and so we took him down to Ward's Cove, and that picture was taken at the entrance to Fallen Rock Cave, which is one of a really great, big, nice caves there. And I remember we were looking over, just looking down Ward's Cove. It's very impressive if you haven't seen. The big Fallen Rock cave system comes under there and dumps out into Maiden Spring. If Whittemore is here, and some of you guys have worked on this system. And I remember Scat saying to me, he said, gee, this reminds me of Slovenia. Okay, touche, buddy. I didn't say it. Got to be really diplomatic, especially with foreigners. I said, look, boy, I told you we have pretty impressive karst. We don't have big poliers over here, but we got a whole hell of a lot of other good karst. He didn't say any more. We're still friends, I think. All right, so you probably recognize these gentlemen. This is John Cooper, and who was this guy over on the right? Wrote Caves of West Virginia. Bill Davies. We were a bit younger then. You can see, but it was I think it was a cave board meeting someplace. I'm not sure. I thought it was an interesting historical shot. All right, and some of the groups, some of the animals, organisms I work on, have been for many, many years. It's a little amphipod crustacean called Stegobromus, and I thought I'd throw that in just to show you what they look like up close. And I've had a number of graduate students doing groundwater research and working with amphipods, and one or two of them are actually here today, whatever it is. But they were a pretty industrious group working, you see, with the syringes. You can't see their face, so I won't tell you who they are, but they were good students, and always hard working. And another trick we used, we actually borrowed this from the Europeans, and that was to put a bucket under a drip, and this is Waggle Cave in Lee County. We kept finding all these amphipods in these pools and wondering how they got there because there's no stream. And I'd say, well, there's water dripping in. And I had, over in Moulins in France, they had used these buckets to collect things. And where are these organisms coming from? So that's what we're doing here, putting buckets on these troughs. And this is Waggle Cave in Lee County. Some of you have been there. And we started finding, all of a sudden, these buckets were filling up with amphipods, and the only way they got in there was coming out of the drips. So we assume now that the habitat is above the cave, actually. That's what we're seeing in one of these cave pools is not the natural habitat. It was kind of an interesting thing, but just thought I'd toss that in. So here's another graduate student busy at work with it. This, I think, picture was taken in a Tennessee cave. And we're also in the drip pools where you see a lot of these organisms. Or in cave streams. This is Jim Estes, who was another graduate student. This picture is back in Lee County. Another grad student and collecting also. And now we'll take a look at Dave Culver. Dave couldn't be here tonight and couldn't be here for the convention for some reason. Primarily, I think because he's in Slovenia working on his project over there right now. And I'll mention there right now, and I think Dan Fong said earlier that his book, along with his co-author, has just come out from Academic Press. It's called Shallow Groundwater Habitats. And it's a very interesting book, and I'm planning to review it, and I'll probably put it in the review in the NSS News. And what he's doing there, I think, they're trying to show the relationship of these so-called seeps, and comes back to the drip pools that a lot of organisms we see in caves, especially small crustaceans, actually live all the way down. And so there's a relationship from the shallow groundwater habitats to the deeper cave habitats. And this was a very interesting area that they got interested in. As I said, it was primarily initiated in Slovenia. But it's been trading it back and forth, and I think he's over there right now working on that project. Anyway, he loves that little syringe. I think Dave would rather be on the surface with the syringe than in the cave. It's safer that way. And so you remember back a few NSS conferences ago when he made some kind of presentation. So he's been one of my longest and oldest, longest standing colleagues, working pretty much in the same areas. Now, go back to the DOM. So they started in '61, and then a year or two later, we moved them over to Pennington Gap. And I think this has gone on in the Pennington Gap DOM something like 40-some years. A long-standing tradition. Everybody would just start showing up there. There was no invitations, no formality. And it got so popular, so many people were coming in there that Pennington Gap was a little town there way out in Lee County. And we stayed in this old hotel, the old hotel there. And well, after a few years it got pretty rough in there because all these retired coal miners were staying in there too, and some of them had black lung disease. It got pretty bad in there. But they built a motel across the street, and that's where we started staying. But some of our early DOMs took place here, and they had a room for us in the back, and that's where we are. And if you look carefully, you'll see some people here that you might recognize. Do you see yourself here? Anybody? Some of you in here are in this picture. You probably don't recognize yourself now because you've aged.
What year was it, John?
Oh Lord, it's still back in the 60s.
That's Steve Paziska back in there.
What?
If that's Steve Snell and Jeff Paziska back there, it was 66.
In what year?
66, first time girls came.
Charlie.
No.
That's Tom Speed.
Well, if you see yourself in there, raise your hand. I'm going to come in. You can't see?
No, I can't.
Yeah. I'm in the back, the upper left, with the beard and wore glasses. Who's that behind you, John?
Who's that guy right there in front?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not,
Maybe 66.
we got a lot accomplished, really.
This has to be after 1980. Because my first DOM was probably 1981.
Okay. I'd say it's went on for 40 some years, so sooner or later somebody's going to show up here. But seriously, a lot of work was done, and we didn't just meet for a week and go and sit back in the party room every night and drink. Everybody was out, and we found a lot of new caves, mapped a lot of caves, and did a lot of work actually over in Tennessee and over in Kentucky, but primarily concentrated on Lee County, and sometimes adjoining Scott County and so forth. But this was a tradition, and it went on. There was no invitations or anything sent out. It just everybody knew it's Thanksgiving week's coming. Let's get in the car and go to Pennington Gap, Virginia, and they show up like that. You knew it starting on Monday or Tuesday of that whole week. People started showing up there, and the people that ran the hotel loved us because we came with money. we weren't just hanging out there with black lung disease. We were there to go caving. Whatever, we were good for the economy anyway. That's why they gave us the back room. Well, that's a little too dark, but it got collected in there sometime. I think Phil Lucas has got to be in here someplace. Yeah.
Not there.
I know he's out in here someplace.
Start the car races.
Well, I say it's getting a little dark here. I think I see him right down on the left someplace. There's another. Now that's getting down. I think something like 40-some years, successive years that we had this, and I think it's still going on. But this old Shelburne Hotel it either fell down, burned down, or was condemned and hauled out of town. And they put a motel across the street, and that's where we had been going. We've been going since then. But anyway, this was actually across the street, and some of you will recognize some of these papers. I'm, of course, obviously there in the front, but that gentleman back there, does anybody know who that is? Roy D. Powers? What? What did you say? Who's on the left? That's Roy Powers' daughter. See, I thought this would bring back some good memories. Now, over the years at Old Dominion University, I developed a course called Cave Biology. It was an upper division graduate course, and God, it must have had 20 some of those, 24 or 25 of those things. I have it every year, and they were open to graduate students and senior biology majors. They were very popular, and we did a field trip, started out in Norfolk and worked our way up to Madison Saltpeter Cave and stopped there to see the Antralena and the Cerulanas, which I'll talk about. Went all over to West Virginia and spent a day in Greenbrier County looking at that karst and going in a couple of caves, and some of you were involved in this or remember this. And then we went down to Tazewell County and went to Wards Cove. And then that was another karst area, and went in Fallen Rock Cave, Hugh Young, looked at the big resurgence, and the next day we came back through Burke's Garden, which is on the way back across the mountains. And there's another big karst area up there. And then home, a 4 or 5 day trip. So, and this course, it got written up in one of the national education magazines. It was as a unique experience or something. I don't know the exact words on it. Yeah?
10 minutes.
10 minutes to go? Yes. Oh, okay, I'm fine. I'm almost through. Leave a little time for questions or hooting and booing or whatever happens at the end of this. All right, this is going to end it right here pretty much. This is the map recently we published in that second version of Invertebrate Cave Fauna in Virginia, and I'm using that to illustrate, has this thing got a pointer on it? I don't want to turn it off. Oh, the little one in the middle? Oh, yeah, okay. All right, there's two things I want to call your attention to before I stop and get fairly serious here for a moment. This is Augusta County, Rockingham County, and this is obviously Madison Saltpeter Cave, which is highly significant because of this organism, Antralena lyra. I'll show you a picture of that organism in a minute. It's a different kind of isopod than you normally see. It belongs out in the Caribbean, and that's where its first cousin is today, but these things got dumped off during a Mississippian embayment. And all this area was underwater, and I have another map to show you that. And it's a relic species, and it really does belong in the Caribbean. It does not belong in a deep pool in Madison Saltpeter Cave. And it's quite interesting. And we have done everything we can to protect it. It's on the threatened and/or endangered species list. And of course, there's been some activity here in grottos with Grand Caverns wanting to expand, and the town wanted to put a water line in and would have messed up everything. Unfortunately, with our cave, the cave board and the heritage program, we've gotten right on, and with the permission of the landowners, or with the cooperation of the landowners, to essentially put this thing off limits and let the town of Grottos and their Grand Caverns stay over there, and we'll keep this because this is a real jewel of an organism. Okay, now back to this. Okay, so we're very protective of this cave. Of course, we've got one of our cave protection signs in. And just to show you, we've got a nice, strong gate, and they won't even let me in. Lock myself out of my own cave. And that's the little guy we're trying to protect. Very unique. And its first cousin, or almost twin brother, is still out down there in the Caribbean. And apparently this thing got dumped off when you see this embayments over here. Over the blue are the embayments on the right hand, then coming back over on this side are spots where this thing has been found, mostly in deep water. It's a deep phreatic water species, meriting obviously a lot of consideration, and it's on the endangered and/or threatened species list, so it's pretty well protected. Okay, now one last look. Let's go back to this map. It was in our paper not so long ago. Not to show you that, but once again, I want to make sure I don't want to mess this up. Okay, let's look at this area. This is Lee County. This is things I've been talking about earlier. But it's a very interesting place because you've got the Gap Cave system running right along in here, and it's still going. It used to be called Cudjoe's, and it was a commercial cave there for a while. It's right at the very tip of Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee is down here, of course. And then over on this side is the Powell Mountain Escarpment. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures there because there's some really great stuff like Omega Cave, was just discovered not so long ago, and some other people in here will know more about that than I do. Can tell you a little bit about that in a minute. And right down through the middle is the so-called Powell Valley, which is, you've got Mississippian limestone over here and Mississippian limestone over here, and then you've got a near flat-bedded Ordovician limestone right through there. And there are numerous caves all through that area. And we're trying to get as much protection as we can from the Nature Conservancy in the Virginia Karst program and Natural History as a Heritage program, trying to obtain, once again, a strip of property here starting up around Jonesville and going all the way down to the Tennessee line, so about 12 miles of beautiful karst and some of our best caves. We'll go back in a minute and take a look at Unthanks Cave, which I talked about earlier, and the Surgeoner Cave, which is another one. There's 3 or 4 endangered species here, and some magnificent karst and subterranean drainage. And also I want to mention a Gibson Fraser Cave. It's involved here, and it's one of the it's a cave, gray bat, recessants, which of course is on the endangered species list. All this stuff is living here. And we're trying to come up with the Natural Heritage Program and Nature Conservancy to purchase or get easements on all of this 12 or 13 mile stretch from Jonesville all the way down to the Tennessee line to lock this up. And then you've got protecting, we're coming up, I'm sure the Cave Research Foundation can talk about what's going on here at Gap Cave, and there's some people here who will talk a little bit about, or can answer questions about this, to get this whole area under some sort of permanent conservation easement or something, and to protect this magnificent place and all its species. And that is pretty much it, I think, for what I wanted to say. And so if there is time for questions, and I know that Will Orndorff will certainly want to make some statements about that. There's just a couple more pictures, and then we'll open it up to questions, and anybody else can comment on it. Now, let's go back. Okay. All right, so here's some of what I was talking about. This is Parsons Cave. It's over top of the Omega Cave System, which was a fairly recent discovery. It's kind of interesting because Bill Cuddington had gone in a cave back up here, back up this way, some years earlier, and it's something like Bill didn't crawl. He got to the bottom, and I don't know why he didn't keep going. There was somebody kind of left it alone, and in recent years, somebody went back in there, and strong air was coming out of there, and they dropped into something, and they went down under Parsons Cave into this thing they call Omega, which will comment on. This is an old saltpeter cave. It's very impressive. Now, just go down back. Let's go back down into the flatter part of the Powell Valley, back to the Ordovician limestone, and look at 2 last things before we stop. All right, this is Surgeoner, Surgeoner Gallahan Cave, which I mentioned earlier, and this is a big resurgence down near the Powell River. I just think it's a magnificent entrance. And so here you're looking in, and if you don't like it inside, you're looking out. And that is all I have to say. I will be happy to answer questions. Will's here. A number of other people are here that have caved with me in this area, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, John. Now, before we open up the floor to questions, I have an important safety announcement. Several times during John's talk, he referred to something he called the DOM. I know we have many dear friends here, and particularly young ladies. I want you to be aware that DOM is an acronym for Dirty Old Man. So please consult your physics professional.
What did you think it might stand for? I don't dare ask. Yes.
What cave was it that we were in when we found it? What cave was it that we were in when we found the amphipod that was coming down the
It was what?
Flowstone.
It was what?
Like coming down the flowstone, and then it tried to go back up. What cave was that? Do you remember?
Was that a nightmare?
No.
He was coming down the flowstone and tried to go back up?
Right.
Was it Molly Waggle where we set the trap, set the big buckets of water and we started? Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It could be that. The Europeans were finding things in water in Moli, in their cave over there where they have do all the experimental stuff. And so we wondered for a long time where some of these things are coming we find in drip pools because there's no running water. So Dave Culver and I put some buckets and traps and stuff in various caves. There was a trough in Molly Waggle, and there was no water flowing in here, and there's no flooding, but yet there was all kinds of amphipods swimming around in this trough. And I said, well, Dave, they've got to be coming from the drips. And so we started putting buckets around under drips, and sure enough, we started finding amphipods and isopods that were literally coming in through drip pools. They're living up in the interstices, which may be the primary habitat for some of these species. Recently, if you're interested, I'll send you a reprint of a paper we did on the cave, the John Friends Cave out in western Maryland, where there's two larger amphipods living in the streams, but these tiny little things show up in there, and they are presumably are coming in from drips. And it's kind of an interesting situation that a lot of people didn't really understand until we started finding these things, that there's different habitats going on here, and they're crossing over somehow. And caves are just a fantastic place to see this and test it, because you've really got a closed environment, and you could put a bucket here and if something shows up in that bucket, it didn't come up the sides. It has to come from down on the ground. Yeah, okay.
But John, you know,
Yeah.
in Oregon, we did find them coming over the Rimstone dams. When you go down the Masters entrance and turn right and go up, they were coming over those dams, but there was some place that you and I found that one that was coming down the formation.
It was coming down the what?
It was coming down Flowstone.
Yeah, no, I remember, yeah. But there was water film coming.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
water film.
okay, well that's really the same thing, because the flowstone's coming down from the top. There are cracks up there, and in other words, for some of these small crustaceans, the primary habitat are the interstices in the limestones, and they're coming in, and what you see in a cave, not always, but sometimes, it's a secondary habitat. And of course, they drop back into cave water. They're going to survive. And when you come in there, you think, well, is this their primary habitat? And the answer is no. The primary habitat is upstairs someplace, up in the rocks. That's not true for all species. It's true for the smaller ones in some cases. Okay, next question.
I've got a question for Captain Carter.
Yes.
Could you explain to the people what the Dirty Old Man's Club was and who was the early people?
The Dirty Old Men. How did
Have you ever heard of that?
No. I don't know. It was someplace, I can't remember for sure. And they said, well, you're just dirty old men or something. And that just sort of caught on. And I think it was after Castlewood or Clint, whatever. I think it was after Banner's Corner. I think it was after we started getting together over in Pennington Gap. I don't know how that
It was Pennington Gap, John.
what we got labeled dirty old men?
Yes,
Okay.
because two girls showed up.
And were they asked to go home or did they stay?
D-Cell and Jeff. I can't pronounce it.
Said what?
You know them. The two DC Grotto kids.
Thank you very much for attending today. John has agreed to hang out in the hallway for a short while. So if you'd like to talk to John some more or have an
Thank you.
autograph,
I had a great time, enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.